Download the AllStar app. Make your picks for UFC fights, challenge your friends, level up and win prizes. Link in description. Get it now.
All right, UFC 306 went down last night or yesterday or this last weekend in Las Vegas in the Sphere, the first event that they had in the Sphere. Just to comment on the Sphere and like the production and everything, because everybody was all hyped for that one. I felt like watching it on TV, it wasn't like, it was like you knew something was going on there, but you're not really experiencing it in real life. You know, you're not really seeing it like it should be seen. You know what I mean? Like when you watch the Super Bowl or like any other major like sports events, it's very similar to other sports events, right? There's nothing like extra that they put in. Maybe they have like a concert at halftime or something like that, but outside of that, you don't really see nothing special. In this one, you know, they were inside of a sphere, never done before. You know, there was like cool, you know, graphics and video packages, but I think like if you weren't there, it doesn't really, it's not impressive. I didn't think it was impressive watching it on TV. What'd you think?
So like, yeah, I think I was like, if I were actually in the venue watching all of that happen, that probably would have been pretty epic. Because it's like, I kind of thought of it as, you know, if you look at this massive, you know, when you go to a movie theater and you got that big screen, right? That's pretty epic. You get to really feel the movie, but then like an entire curved wall
Yeah.
of that. You know, when they did like the basically like not a legit hologram, but like when they put the images of the fighters on the whole display compared to how small they were, like they look like ants, you know, in the ring
Yeah.
compared to like how big. That was pretty cool. So like, but then it made me wonder too, how different would the view have been depending on your seat, right? So like, what if you were all the way at the back instead of like basically as close to ringside as you could get? I'm sure the view would have been very different too, because even in movie theaters, it would be like that.
Yeah, it kind of reminds me of a movie theater I went to a long time ago where the seating was kind of like stadium style, and then
Ooh.
the screen was like flat.
Oh.
So wherever you were sitting, you're getting a piece of the screen, and it was very close
Oh,
up.
okay, yeah. So you get that same angle.
Yeah, but
Okay.
you can see everything, and
Right,
your
right.
viewpoint is a little bit different, but pretty much everybody can see what you see. Because
Yeah.
the stadium seating, it was like very high up. It wasn't like, you know, long and gradually that goes up, you know what I mean, like
Yeah.
most movie theaters.
Right, right.
I think that maybe it was that kind of experience.
Okay.
But still, though, like, I don't know. Like, watching on TV, it didn't really make much of a difference to me. Like, once the fight started, it's in a cage. So it's like, it's
Yeah.
pretty much every cage is the same.
Right.
It's not like they were fighting outside or anything like that. Even with that, like, it didn't really make a difference. Like when they first started doing the shows in, you know, in the Apex or on Fight Island with no crowd and all that, it was cool because you get to hear everything, and the sound was different. Like you did hear like difference
Yeah.
in sound. Even
Right,
the
right.
commentators talked about it.
Uh-huh.
But visually, it was like if you're not there, it doesn't really affect you.
That's true. If you clipped out the production value stuff, you know, that happened in between the fights, it would have just been like a good card, you know,
Yeah.
of a UFC event. But then having those like graphics, those videos and stuff, you know, making it set on Mexican Independence Day, I think it adds a little bit of there's a sense of this is a cool special occasion, right?
Yeah.
It's like, you know, they get to use the sphere, they get to do what they can to figure out if the production itself is either worth continuing,
Yeah.
you know, or how they might improve upon it. I bet the in-person experience would have been way more impactful than watching it behind a screen like most of us would have, you know, on like a pay-per-view or something.
Oh, it probably would have been incredible being there. You know what I mean? But,
Yeah.
But as a person that's sitting at home,
Right,
it
sitting at
wasn't-
home, not a big difference. Like once the fight starts, it's the same view,
Yeah.
you know.
Yeah. Yeah. The only thing was like you get to hear the echoes. It was a
Oh,
little
that's
bit
true.
different.
The sound did carry a little bit
Yeah, they
different.
care, and you get to hear certain things that you probably wouldn't have been able to hear before,
Right,
Because
right.
of the echoing.
True,
But let's get to the fights. The main event, bantamweight world title, Sean O'Malley takes his second L against Merab. You know, it
Mm-hmm.
was one of two outcomes that people saw happening.
Yeah.
Was Merab mixes in the wrestling, wins a decision, or O'Malley gets a knockout, right? And you know, both things were close to happening. Well, one thing actually happened was Merab, you know,
Yeah.
used his dominant wrestling.
Right.
You know, stayed away from a lot of the power shots, even though he did get hit a few times.
Mm-hmm.
But he recovered pretty good. And probably the biggest threat was probably the fifth round when Sean like teeped him a few times. Looked like
Yeah.
he got hurt to the body.
Right. Right.
He should have swarmed, but he didn't swarm for some reason. There was like at the end of the fight, in the last 2 minutes, you know, when he was supposed to go, there were like periods of like maybe 20 seconds where he wouldn't do anything. He was just running around. Sean O'Malley wasn't attacking, right? And that's his job, you know. I mean, Merab won the fight already.
Yeah.
So like, you know, in this fight, it doesn't make you a genius if you picked one or the other, because that was what we were going to see. We're going to see Merab dominate with his wrestling, win a decision, or maybe even finish him on the ground somehow.
Right.
Or O'Malley catches him. You know, you don't really see O'Malley going for submissions, but, you know, it would be like a knockout. And, you know, it's hard to put on a striking clinic against someone that has, like, the incredible gas tank that Merab has, and he can just chain his wrestling and his grappling really, really well to where, you know, Sean O'Malley didn't really have many answers for the grappling. You know, like there was a time where he did get up, but that was just early in the fight.
Yep.
Later in the fight, dude, it was just drained.
Yeah.
What do you think?
Yeah, like it's a very clear example of like when you've got two fighters that are extremely good at two different things, then the battle becomes like I need to make sure I can impose my game on the other person, right? And it's not, and even in this case where if you try to adjust your game based on what your opponent doing, and if you're just reacting and responding to what your opponent's doing, you're not even going to win that fight. The skill level's too different in, you know, the specialties. And so this was like, all right, you know, Merab was really good about, I'm going to play my game, I'm going to force him to play my game. The interesting thing too was that Merab did not look as trigger happy as he does in some of his other fights, right? He wasn't gunning for takedowns like every 15, 20, 30 seconds like he would have been in the other fights. And so it's interesting to see that he's capable of using his same game but applying it at a different pace, a different cadence. And so if he has that ability now, then he's probably become much more difficult to beat, because now, you know, at least in that fight, he's kind of shown more signs that he can actually play some strategy, some tactics.
Cerebral.
Yeah.
He's become more cerebral. Like you said, he wasn't spazzy as he normally was.
Yeah.
Yeah, he wasn't spamming takedowns. Maybe that had to do a lot with Sean O'Malley's approach as well, of him, you know, waiting to counter on your moves, right? And you know, instead of shooting on the first or second attempt, maybe he was waiting for the third attempt, or maybe he was shooting. He was angling a certain way, you know, because he was moving around a lot.
Yeah, he had to pick and choose his shots much more. Whereas, like, you know, if you go in, and then sometimes if you put too much force in, right, and then you end up overextending yourself, and then if you overextend yourself, you're off balance, and then that's when you can get hit, especially in MMA. I think that had to be at the top of like Merab's mind too, because if you make one or two of those mistakes against Sean, it could be over.
Yeah,
like
and
what happened
also
with
one thing that Sean was doing, and he prepared for this, I guess, is he was punching way lower and to the body a lot more, straight to the body, right? And he clipped him a bunch of times to the body, right?
Yeah, he connected.
But he was like really like emphasizing that, and obviously the knees down the middle. And Merab, you know, he's probably, you know, thinking like that's an option for Sean O'Malley. So maybe I'm not gonna shoot straight ahead.
Right.
And maybe angle off to the side, push to the fence, angle off to the side.
Yeah.
Or if you clinch, it's, you know, the knees are not as impactful, right?
That's true.
So maybe that's the reason why Merab was the way he was. But he won the fight, you know what I mean? You win the fight the way you can, especially if it's a title fight and, you know, it's big money, you know, involved. Sean O'Malley, he looked off as well. He didn't look as sharp as he normally did, and that probably had a lot to do with Merab and his approach, right? Maybe he was expecting something different. Did Sean O'Malley have option B, C, and D?
Yeah, it looked like he was I wouldn't even say super dialed in, but I'm sure like he had one outcome that he really really wanted, which like outside of the obvious one of winning would be like have to look for this knockout, and it looked like because he couldn't get it and because he couldn't really it didn't seem like he was able to do anything that was wobbling Merab or doing anything significant by way of damage until bits and pieces of the fifth round. I think he like it almost, I don't want to say it looked like he checked out a little bit, but he definitely did not look as dialed into his fights as we've seen Sean O'Malley dialed in like some of his previous fights.
Well, there was rumors going around that O'Malley was about to pull out of this fight due to personal reasons.
Okay.
And that means, like, if this is any truth to that, right? That means, like, there was something, weighing heavily on him mentally.
Yeah.
You know what I mean? Outside of fighting. And we know, that does affect the fighter.
Absolutely.
In their performance. When
Yep.
their mind is not focused on the fight and they're thinking of things outside the ring, it's a big problem, man. Like,
Yeah.
it could have went way worse if that was something that really weighed heavy. There was a huge
Absolutely.
blanket over Sean O'Malley in this fight. We don't know. We might not never find out. But there was rumors going around about
Okay.
that.
I see.
And I'm not trying to make an excuse for that. I'm just saying, like, that was something that was being talked about.
Yeah.
So Merab goes in there, does what he does, becomes the UFC champion, bantamweight champion of the world. His story is just off. Like, it's incredible, man. It's one of those stories. It's a feel-good story. You know what I mean? He's always been trying to be the good guy and, earn his spot. You've seen a lot of these dudes now, like, in these divisions that have earned, like, seriously earned their shot at a title and won the championship.
Yeah.
Bilal Muhammad most recently. Now you got Merab,
Right.
who was denied because he didn't want to fight his
Fight
training
Aljo.
partner. Yeah,
Right.
training
Yeah. And then
partner.
Aljo moved up, and then now
Yeah.
that's open for him, and so.
Yeah, so like he has his reign open, right? But
Yeah.
the thing is, like, he has a lot of tough tasks in front of him, dude. Because there's a lot of guys that I think he can fight that can beat him.
Right.
I just think that Sean O'Malley can't beat him. I think that's the thing. I think Sean O'Malley's style, if he doesn't clip him, then what's A, B, C, and D?
Right.
Like,
True.
you do some spinning kicks, some teeps to the chest. You know what I mean? Like, you
Yeah,
got
that's true.
the step back, like shotgun that you have. But what if they're never attacking you to step into the shotgun?
Right. Right.
So
Yeah, I think a healthy Peter Yan, I think, would like
it'd
match
be
up
an
better.
incredible fight. And I said this on Twitter that, I talked to his manager, and his manager told me that Peter Yan had a shoulder injury 2 weeks before the fight.
Oh man.
Then during fight week, he had a leg issue.
Oh Jesus.
And then also his right hand was, something was wrong with his right hand. So he had like 3 injuries entering the fight.
Fuck.
And he still defended the most defended take, even though he got taken down the most. But
Yeah.
still, Merab was insane with the takedowns. He did not want any problems with the hands, right, with Peter Yan.
Yeah, absolutely.
And someone like that can scramble, that can wrestle, it's gonna be a problem for Merab, right? Again, if because obviously he's won all those fights. But I think, like, if he rematches a lot of these dudes, it's not going to be as easy as you think, especially with the pressure of being champion.
Yeah, and like Peter is one of those guys where I don't think Merab would be able to like take a cerebral approach and then outgun Peter.
Yeah.
Like he'd have to really stick to his guns and like spam it like he did in the first one, where it's just like swarm him, get all over him, try to bring him to the ground, do what you can to just keep him down on the ground and like limit the damage. But even still, like with his skill set, Merab doesn't really keep people down nearly as much as he just.
Oh, that's
repeatedly
his
takes them
style
down.
too. Like, he'll
Yeah.
take you down and then make you work to get back up, and kind of like give you openings to get back up. But he's still in control.
Yeah.
Take you down again.
Right,
And that's
right.
why he's won these, like, has these records, because that's the style. Just because you land a certain amount of takedowns doesn't mean like you're the best at taking people down. And especially keeping them on the ground.
Yeah.
It just shows you that there's strategies, there's different ways. If you want to break a record, you might have the perfect opponent to apply this strategy to and get 25 takedowns in a 3-minute fight. That's
Yeah.
a possibility, right?
Absolutely, yeah.
So, so there's a lot of interesting fights for Merab. I don't think there will be a rematch because that was just Sean O'Malley didn't do anything in that fight, right? And it's not like he was like you know, it was frustrating to watch.
Yeah,
it wasn't a exciting fight at
Right.
all.
Right.
Even the co-main event, we'll get to that. But before we get to the co-main event, the first 20 seconds of the fight was one of the weirdest moments in like title
that's
fight
right.
history.
Yeah.
Right. So
true.
basically, what was going on was that Merab, when the bell rang, I guess Sean O'Malley's corner, his head coach,
Yeah.
Tim Welch,
Right.
was yelling instructions to Merab.
Mind games?
Yeah, it was mind games, right? And it, like, to me, I was like, that's fine, right? Because
Yeah.
he did you see the clip of him yelling instructions to Aljo to during their fight, and
Oh,
it
I've
ended
heard
up
about
getting
this.
him knocked out?
Yeah, you've got to go in, Aldrin.
Yeah, you got to
right?
go in, and then Sean O'Malley knew that was the signal of possibly him coming in. Then bam, he knocked, he clipped him, eventually leading to the finish, right?
Right.
So like he was starting that from the start. To me, that's a smart fucking strategy right there.
Yeah.
Is to get the fighter confused inside the ring.
Right.
And then he picked it up early, so he's just like, but in a fight, you cannot stop the fight. The fighter cannot
Yeah,
stop.
you can't stop the fight just because somebody said something within earshot.
So you're gonna yell at people outside the cage because they're outside the cage too.
Right.
And you're gonna stop and say, hey, he should stop yelling because he's distracting me.
Yeah.
No, you can't do that, right? Herb Dean could have ended the fight right there.
Oh, true.
Like if you stop the fight for a reason,
Oh, you're right. Yeah.
you means you quit.
Yeah.
You cannot stop the fight yourself unless you tap or verbal submission.
Yeah.
Right?
Yeah.
So what do you think of the whole like a coach instructing their opponent to do things to allow your fighter to capitalize?
Yeah, that's interesting, right? So like that's definitely underutilized. People probably because like I would imagine there's got to be some people who think that's unethical, right? So like,
Code of ethics. There's always people.
yeah.
Right.
So like, but also it's like everyone plays mental warfare when you get to that level. It's like, it's no secret. There's certain people in our gym where whether I like it or not, I have to talk shit to them just so like they get used to it. Because then if they get used to it in the training room, then, when they compete, it's fine. But if all we're doing is giving them like soft, words of affirmation or something, if they get to a competition setting and now everyone's fucking yelling and screaming at them, then that becomes a problem. That means I did not sufficiently train them in the competitive environment where they would have to thrive in a position of high pressure and stress. So then we do that kind of training in the gym too, where, there's certain people where it's like, even if it's unethical, you kind of have to prep for it. And for me personally, I feel like the opposite coach talking shit, like if you're, or just yelling anything for that matter, if you're aware of it, you have to prep for it in some way, or at least just being aware of it severely limits the impact it can have on you, I think. So then, if Merab's corner is just like, hey, just so you know, like Tim Welch will say some random stuff to try to get you off your game. Be mindful of it. You don't have to let it get to you. Just stick to what you're good at, and the fight's gonna be okay, right? Like if the messaging's like that, then that's fine. But stopping the fight to address Tim Welch and be like, hey, shut the fuck up, right? Like now that's a bit different. But I'm also glad that Herb Dean chose not to stop the fight, because of that, like, would have technically been an infraction of some sort.
Oh, obviously.
Yeah.
Obviously, yeah, they would have, it's a title fight as well. They would have been nuts. Dana White would have went nuts, right?
Right.
But to me, that's Merab's fault. If Merab does that again, dude, like, you can't continue to stop fights because you think someone's doing something wrong.
Yeah.
And also, I guess in the rule books, there's no rules. There's rules of, like, profanity and, like, stuff like that. Like I guess for corners and fighters. But to be...
Yeah, that was kind of like Herb Dean's discretion to whether or not he could give Merab a free pass on that one, on the infraction, I mean. And so to me, it seems like it was the right call by Herb Dean, just because it was such an unusual thing where it's like, okay, it didn't harm anybody in that moment. So then, yeah, why not let it continue? But in the future, if he continues to do that same infraction, then I think that's, then, like they can be more, what's the word, like they can give a more firm reaction to it and stick closer to the book.
Yeah.
In this one, it was just
yeah, I remember what I was talking about.
Okay.
So there's nothing in the rule books about a corner man yelling instructions to a fighter.
right.
It doesn't matter who the fighter is. I don't believe there's any rules about that. Like,
Yeah.
you say whatever you want to say. You could say, "You piece of shit," like eat shit. Like why would that not be allowed? Why would
Right.
somebody feel like that's unethical? Like, it's all part of the game. It's all part of like warfare.
Yeah.
Mental warfare.
Right, and you are allowed to listen to the opposing corners like
Of course.
instructions, right? If they say like, "Oh, he's getting tired, do this," or
Yeah.
like George, I remember George would sometimes tell me stuff in the corner in Thai instead of English, just so the other person couldn't understand. Like that's happened before, or yeah, like especially when George corners a Thai fighter or something, like he'll do his best to say it in Thai, so then the opponent doesn't understand what instructions he's yelling, right? So like, because then you can respond to those instructions. I mean, you usually respond by doing the opposite of what of what the coach wants their fighter to do. So it's like, if the coach tells the fighter to like take a shot, then you're like, all right, watch the level change or something in response to it. So like, there's nothing wrong with that that exchange where the coach can say something, the opposing fighter can listen to it, and then I guess they get to make a quick judgment of whether they want to respond to that or not. But obviously they've got to respond in a way that they're safe from taking damage from like the other fighter. So that is a bit tricky. I've seen coaches too where it's like they will yell something at their guy to influence the referee in some way, where it's like where they're not actually attacking the other guy, like, oh, he's being passive, or stuff like that, or like, oh, he's grabbing the glove, but it's like just tell your guy to be like proactive and stuff like that. It's like keep working, like, and the ref kind of hears it too, so like you can get in the ref's ear sometimes by coaching your guy. So like there's a bunch of different ways around these mind games and stuff like that. It's definitely been around before, and I think that usually as fans we don't see such a big reaction to it that it wouldn't trigger such a big discussion. But in this case, it was very, very clear that this was a byproduct of the coach saying something and somebody in the fight responding to it. So yeah, it's an interesting take, but it's definitely something that coaches and fighters have both played around with, in the game.
Yeah, so like there's a reason why certain like coaches create code words. Right?
Yeah, Trevor Whitman. That's right.
Vocabulary, like
yeah, he uses like
that they use.
certain names for certain combos or something like that.
So is that cheating? Is that like unethical? Like you talking to the other fighter, the fighter is getting yelled at from people from outside the cage, so it's not like it's a big deal, right? Why are you just focusing on the coach saying something to you?
Yeah.
Also, I think it's part of the mind games. It worked perfectly in the Aljo fight, right? So if it's not against the rules, I think you should utilize it as much as you can.
Absolutely.
Some people will like it, some people won't.
Yeah.
But it's not against the rules. And if you're winning championships, you're winning big fights, it should be utilizing it. Is it against the rules to like learn another language so you understand what the other corner is talking about?
That has happened before.
Yeah,
I've heard about that. Yeah.
Of course. Do you bring somebody into the corner that understands what the other corner is saying in their language, so you could kind of get some feedback from the person that is listening to them?
Yeah.
Oh, even better, I think this one is gonna eventually happen. Is a coach will bring in somebody that's on the team maybe that let's say your opponent is Russian and then you have somebody on your team that's Russian and you bring him as one of the corners so they could sit on the side and yell the wrong instructions to the Russian fighter in Russian while you're coaching your fighter in whatever language you're speaking in.
Right.
And that's also part of the strategy now.
Yeah.
Has anybody thought of that yet?
That'd be fun.
I'm giving you game right now, dude. Like this is a game. This could escalate into something like that, right?
Yeah.
Where Even if your opponent speaks English, and let's say they also speak Spanish, like you bring somebody that speaks Spanish, like if they're from Mexico, Mexican Spanish, or Spanish, or maybe even Portuguese, or
Right,
whatever.
just get the right accent,
Exactly,
right dialect,
right?
Yeah.
And then you have them yelling instructions at certain points of the fight.
Right.
That is all part of the strategy. It's all part of the game. And would the coaches be penalized for that? Would the teams be penalized? Is that against the rules? To like be prepared that deep?
Right.
Mental warfare. What do you think?
Yeah. Oh, that's a tricky one, right? Like it's legit. You can totally use it, right? Like you can't. It's like you can't control the words coming in or out of like somebody's mouth. So they're like, at least whether it's from the coaches, whether it's from the fighters, right? Like fighters talk shit like mid fight. Sean Strickland, Kevin Holland, I think, are the most like obvious ones.
Diaz brothers.
Diaz brothers, right? It's like you can flip the bird on someone too, if like in a fight, if you really want to, right? And like it's, and I think it's the fighter's responsibility to maintain that level of concentration that's required for them to make a good decision, right? It's like just because they're easily swerved by or swayed by like words and stuff like that doesn't make it the fighter's fault, right?
No.
It makes it his responsibility to be like, all right, I've got to have thick skin, right? Like even in basketball, when you're shooting free throws and stuff, right? People are absolutely gonna try to like distract the shit out of you. Like they'll yell stuff at you and they won't be nice about it. And so it's the athlete's responsibility at the end of the day to be like, all right, I know what my coach's voice is. I know, how I'm gonna. I know the words or the voice that I will respond to and listen to and get feedback from. I've got to drown out everybody else's voice except maybe the referee. And yeah, it's like, it's an additional thing that you have to prepare for. And usually the mental things that you have to prepare for are overlooked compared to the physical components of like, you have to prep for this technique. You have to prevent this thing from happening in the fight. But yeah, people overlook, the small little things where like, I've had a teammate who I think he never did it to me in college, but he said like when he was competing in high school, right? He just to piss off the other team or the other corner, he'd be sitting in the corner where the coach was, but like, the coach would, in this case, if there was another teammate competing, there's like 3 mats or something, right? So he'd sit in the corner, the other coach would yell something like gator roll or whatever, right? And then all he would do is counter coach. 1, just to piss off the coach, and 2, just to like piss off the other guy and break their concentration. So then, the coach would say like, do a gator roll. And then my teammate would say like, watch the gator roll, like just 1 or 2 seconds later. And it would just like at some point, I think our own coach asked him to stop doing that because he felt so bad, like we were doing something disrespectful or something like that.
Yeah, but this is competition at the highest level.
Yeah.
People are like, are you gonna, it's like grabbing a fence, grabbing the gloves, which happened in the fight as well. Like,
Yeah.
Sean O'Malley had his fingers deep. Did he even take a point?
He didn't take a
No.
right.
He didn't even take a point, dude. It was like clear as day.
He didn't. Yeah, the fact that he caught it was impressive already.
Yeah.
Like he was like, hey, like get your fingers out of the glove.
And it almost like put him, like I think they put him in a better position.
I think so, cause I think Merab was much lower. Had like better control, like basically was like
legs
chest to
and stuff,
chest
yeah.
or something like that, right? And then when they reset it, it was basically open guard with like Sean was in position to basically upkick
Push,
now.
yeah,
Yeah.
and push off. Yeah, there was a lot of infractions, and man, Herb Dean he just can't catch a break, dude. Like he's it's just things happen, when he's around. It's
That's
almost
true.
like
He gets in all these controversial fights, and
it never happens in one championship.
yeah, that's true.
It always happens in the UFC fights for some reason.
Yeah, and I don't think any of it's like really his fault that these
Nah.
things keep happening, but it is kind of funny.
It's a
that
very reactive occupation.
Yeah.
Right? And and then like it has serious repercussions if you make the wrong decision, and
right.
sometimes it has serious repercussions if you don't act on certain things.
Yeah.
So he's in a shitty position. He's gonna get shit on a lot for this one.
I'm sure.
But yeah, like Merab, he's the new champ, and There's no denying, dude. He's
Absolutely.
very, very good.
Yeah, he earned that one. Absolutely.
Even with all the weirdness that goes on. Is he gonna be like a legendary champ in the division? I can't say he will be. You know what I mean?
That's a tough division.
Yeah,
to
because
stay
there's
champ in.
Umar still there.
Uh-huh.
He's probably gonna get the next shot, undefeated. You know, anything with Habib. You know what I mean?
yeah.
Like involved.
For sure.
He's gonna probably, and Umar's not an easy fight for anybody, man. Like Merab might have been lucky to face O'Malley first.
Yeah.
And then get the title before Umar did. Let's say Umar won the title and Merab had to fight Umar.
Ooh.
That's a hard fight.
That's a tough one. He's like,
You might never taste gold.
Yeah, because imagine if his takedowns get neutralized, right? Then that's a very different fight.
And Umar's a good striker
Yeah.
as well. So that's the fight probably that's going to happen.
Right.
If I was going to get an early pick in, I'd pick Umar to win that fight.
Fair enough, yeah.
Just looking at overall skill set. I would have picked Umar to beat O'Malley too. But the thing is, O'Malley, I think, has a better chance of beating Umar because Umar is confident in striking.
Oh, that
and
he's
will
going to spend
strike
enough
more.
time on the feet.
Exactly. And he might even take more chances on the feet. Merab didn't really take many chances on the feet.
Right, he was like, I better get this shit
Once he
down
got
real
into
quick.
distance, he was like wrestling.
Yeah,
Right? So, well, it's smart for him, right?
Absolutely.
But anyways, we'll see what happens.